It was 3:47 a.m. when I realized my dog had never closed his eyes. Not once. Not since we brought him home. I sat at the kitchen table with my fourth cup of coffee gone cold, watching Milo through the dim glow of the lamp I'd left on in the living room. He sat in the exact same position he'd held for hours, spine rigid, ears forward, eyes fixed on Noah's bedroom door like he was watching for something I couldn't see. 5 nights, 120 hours, and he hadn't slept. Mom? I turned to find Noah in the hallway, 7 years old and small in his dinosaur pajamas, his brown hair sticking up on one side. His voice was soft, careful, the voice he'd started using after his father left, like he was afraid of taking up too much space. Is Milo still awake? I forced a smile I didn't feel. He's fine, honey, just adjusting. Go back to bed. But Noah didn't move. He stood there, studying the golden retriever mix who had stolen his heart at the shelter 6 days ago. Milo's tail gave one small thump against the floor when Noah appeared, but he didn't turn, didn't break his vigil. He looks tired, Noah whispered. He was tired. I could see it in the way Milo's body trembled with the effort of staying upright, in the red-rimmed exhaustion around his amber eyes. But every time his head started to droop, something would jolt him back to attention. A creak in the walls, a shift in Noah's breathing, a car passing outside. I'd tried everything. 3 different beds, calming music, darkness, night lights, treats placed strategically near soft blankets. The vet had examined him and found nothing physically wrong. Give him time, she'd said. Shelter dogs need to decompress. But this wasn't decompression. This was something else. Come on, bud, I said to Noah, guiding him back to his room. Let's let him be. After I tucked Noah in for the second time that night, I returned to my vigil at the kitchen table. Milo hadn't moved. From this angle, I could see the way his front legs shook, the way his eyelids would flutter and catch, fighting the pull of sleep. And then, in the quiet of that early morning hour, a thought slid into my mind like ice water. He's not adjusting. He's waiting. Waiting for what, I didn't know, but as I watched this exhausted dog refuse the basic mercy of rest, something in my chest tightened with a fear I couldn't name. What had happened to him that made sleep feel dangerous? 3 weeks earlier, I wouldn't have imagined myself at a shelter at all. I was 30 years old, drowning in single motherhood and barely keeping my head above water. The divorce had been final for 8 months, but the aftermath clung to everything. The too quiet apartment, the way Noah flinched at raised voices, the crushing guilt that woke me at 2 a.m. most nights, whispering that I was failing him. My days blurred together. Wake up, make breakfast Noah wouldn't eat, drop him at school, I work my administrative job at the medical office downtown, pick Noah up, homework, dinner, bath, bed, collapse, repeat. I was present, but I wasn't there. Not really. I saw it in the way Noah had stopped talking about his day, stopped asking me to play, stopped reaching for me when he was hurt. He'd learned to fold into himself, to need less for me. And God, that was the worst part, that my 7-year-old son had already learned that needing things was dangerous. The school counselor had been gentle when she called. Noah seems withdrawn, she'd said, more than a typical adjustment to divorce. Have you considered maybe a pet? Sometimes children find it easier to open up when... I'd cut her off politely and promised to think about it. I couldn't afford a pet. I could barely afford our 2-bedroom apartment. And the thought of taking on one more responsibility, one more living thing that needed me when I was already running on empty, it felt impossible. But that night, I had watched Noah eat his chicken nuggets in silence, his small hands methodical, his eyes distant. And when I asked him about school, he'd said, "Fine," in a voice so carefully flat it made my throat ache. I thought about my ex-husband's new apartment across town, the one where Noah spent every other weekend. "He's doing great with me," David had said last month, and I'd heard the implication, "better than with you." Maybe he was right. Maybe a dog would help. Maybe giving Noah something to love, something that would love him back unconditionally, would reach the parts of him I couldn't seem to access anymore. Or maybe I was just desperate. "Just looking," I told myself as I searched shelter websites that night after Noah was asleep. "No commitments, just looking." But even as I scrolled through photos of dogs with pleading eyes and heartbreaking stories, something in my chest whispered a warning. You can't even take care of yourself and your son. What makes you think you can handle this? I closed the laptop. The next morning, Noah asked if we could go to the park. When I said yes, he actually smiled. A real one, the first I'd seen in weeks. And as we walked past the animal shelter 2 blocks from our apartment, he stopped. "Can we go in?" he asked. "Just to look?" I should have said no. Should have walked past. Should have protected us both from the risk of more heartbreak, more responsibility, more ways to fail. Instead, I heard myself say, "Okay, but just to look. No promises." Noah's hand slipped into mine, and for the first time in months, it felt like hope. The shelter was overwhelming, a cacophony of barking, the sharp smell of disinfectant barely masking the scent of too many animals in too small a space. Dogs lunged at kennel doors, spinning and yipping and desperate for attention. All except one. In the third kennel on the left, a golden retriever mix sat perfectly still. He was medium-sized, maybe 45 pounds, with a honey-colored coat and intelligent amber eyes that tracked our movement without reaction. No barking, no jumping, just watching. "That's Milo," the volunteer said, a college-aged girl with kind eyes and the rehearsed cheerfulness of someone who'd given the speech too many times. "He's about 3 years old, super gentle, great with kids." Noah had already moved closer to the kennel, pressing his face near the chain link. "Hi, Milo." The dog's ears perked forward, but he didn't rush to greet Noah like the others had done. He simply stood, slowly, and walked to the front of the kennel with deliberate calm. "Can I pet him?" Noah asked. The volunteer opened the kennel door, and I tensed, waiting for the rush of energy, the overwhelming affection that shelter dogs usually displayed. It didn't come. Milo stepped out with careful precision, approached Noah, and sat. Just sat. His tail gave a few slow, measured wags, but his eyes never left Noah's face. It wasn't excitement, it was assessment, focus. Noah knelt down, and Milo leaned into him, not with the desperate neediness of an abandoned dog, but with something that looked almost like duty. "He likes you," the volunteer said. "We've had him for about 6 weeks. His previous owner surrendered him when—" She paused, choosing her words carefully, "when their circumstances changed." "Why?" I asked. "Oh, life happens. They didn't give us much detail." Her smile was tight, practiced. "But he's been perfect here. Quiet, obedient, house-trained. He'd be great for a family." Something about the way she said it made me uneasy. The words were right, but there was something beneath them, something unsaid. I watched Milo with Noah. My son was stroking the dog's head, and for the first time in months, his shoulders had relaxed. He was smiling, actually smiling. Milo sat perfectly still, his body pressed against Noah's legs, his eyes never wavering. "He's not playful, exactly," the volunteer continued, "but he's very attentive, aware. Some dogs are just naturally protective." Protective. That word should have comforted me. Instead, it lodged in my chest like a stone. But Noah was looking up at me with those hopeful eyes, and Milo was leaning into him like Noah was the only thing in the world that mattered, and I thought, maybe this is exactly what we need. 20 minutes later, I was signing adoption papers. The volunteer processed the forms efficiently, gave us a folder of information, a leash, and a small bag of the food Milo had been eating. "Any questions? Just call," she said, "and give him time to adjust. The first few weeks can be rocky." As we walked toward the exit, Milo on the leash beside Noah, I glanced back at the volunteer. She was watching us leave, and just for a moment, her professional smile slipped. She looked worried. Then the door closed behind us, and we were in the parking lot, Noah chattering about where Milo would sleep and what toys we'd buy. And I was telling myself that the unease in my stomach was just normal new pet anxiety. Milo walked beside us with perfect obedience, his eyes constantly scanning. Not the parking lot, not the other people, but Noah. Always Noah. I should have asked more questions, should have pressed for details about those changed circumstances, but I was too busy watching my son come back to life to notice the warning signs. Night one, I chalked it up to nerves. We'd set up a dog bed in the living room, soft and expensive, with one of Noah's old t-shirts tucked into the blanket so Milo could get used to his scent. Noah had wanted Milo to sleep in his room, but I'd insisted we start slow. At 11 p.m., I turned off the lights and went to bed, exhausted in that bone-deep way that had become my default state. At 2 a.m., I woke up to use the bathroom and found Milo sitting beside Noah's door. Not lying down, sitting, alert, awake. "Milo," I whispered. "Bed, come on." He looked at me, then back at the door, didn't move. I tried leading him back to the dog bed. He followed obediently, but the moment I turned away, he returned to his post at Noah's door. "He's just nervous," I told myself. "New house, new people, he'll settle." I went back to bed and told myself I'd deal with it in the morning. Night two, I tried a different approach. I moved the dog bed into Noah's room, hoping that being closer would help Milo relax. Noah was thrilled. I was hopeful. At midnight, after Noah had fallen asleep with his arm draped over Milo's back, I checked on them. Milo was sitting upright beside the bed, his eyes fixed on Noah's sleeping face. "Lie down," I said softly, gesturing to the dog bed. "It's okay. Sleep." Milo glanced at me briefly, then returned his attention to Noah. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. He didn't lie down. When I checked again at 3 a.m., he was in the exact same position. When Noah stirred in his sleep and coughed, Milo's entire body tensed, ears forward, every muscle coiled. "He's adjusting," I told myself. "Give him time." Night 3, I started to panic. Milo was showing signs of exhaustion. Slower movements, a slight tremor in his legs, a glassy quality to his eyes. But he wouldn't rest. Wouldn't even sit in a relaxed position. He was always upright, always vigilant. I'd tried soft commands, gentle persuasion. I'd even considered crating him, but the idea of forcing him into that kind of confinement when he was already clearly distressed felt cruel. Instead, I watched. And as I watched, I started to notice patterns. Every time Noah shifted in bed, Milo's eyes tracked the movement. When Noah's breathing changed, deeper and REM sleep or catching with congestion, Milo's head would tilt, analyzing. Once, when Noah kicked off his blanket, Milo stood and nosed it back over him, then resumed his vigil. He wasn't just watching Noah sleep. He was monitoring him, protecting him. From what, I couldn't fathom. We lived in a safe neighborhood. Our apartment door was locked. Noah was fine. Healthy, breathing normally, safe in his bed. But Milo didn't seem to believe that. Or maybe he did, and he'd decided his job was to make absolutely certain it stayed that way. By 4 a.m. on the third night, my exhaustion was turning to anger. At myself for not knowing what to do, At Milo for refusing to accept help, at the situation itself for being one more impossible thing I had to navigate alone. I sat on Noah's floor and tried one more time. Milo, I said, my voice cracking with fatigue. Please, you need to sleep. You're going to make yourself sick. He looked at me, and for just a moment, I saw something in his eyes that stopped my breath. Not defiance, not stubbornness, fear. This dog was terrified of sleep. Not uncomfortable, not anxious, terrified. And as I sat there in the darkness of my son's room, watching this exhausted animal fight against his own body's desperate need for rest, I realized with horrible clarity, he isn't guarding the house, he's guarding my son. The question was, what did he think he was guarding him from? By night 5, Milo was visibly deteriorating. His gait had become unsteady, he'd stopped eating. When Noah tried to pet him, Milo would lean into the touch, but his eyes never closed, never softened. He was running on fumes, and I was terrified he was going to collapse. The vet had examined him on day 4 and found nothing physically wrong. Her vitals are stressed, she'd said, but there's no medical reason he can't sleep. This is behavioral. Maybe see a dog behaviorist? I couldn't afford a dog behaviorist. I could barely afford the vet visit. So on the 5th night, after Noah was asleep and Milo had resumed his rigid watch, I sat down at the kitchen table with the adoption papers and found the shelter's emergency contact number. It rang 4 times before a woman answered. Riverside Shelter, this is Karen. Hi, I adopted a dog from you 6 days ago. Milo? Golden Retriever mix? A pause. Yes, is everything okay? He won't sleep, I said and heard my voice crack. At all. Not once since we brought him home. He just sits and watches my son, and he's exhausted, and I don't know what to do. Another pause, longer this time. I'm sorry, what was your name? Sarah Mitchell. Miss Mitchell, Karen's voice had changed, becoming careful. Has Milo shown any aggression, any concerning behavior besides the sleeplessness? No, he's perfect, gentle, obedient. He just won't rest. And he's watching your son specifically? Yes, constantly. I heard papers rustling. Then, Miss Mitchell, I need to be honest with you. We didn't know the full extent of Milo's history when he was surrendered. We knew he'd been through something traumatic, but his previous owners didn't give us much detail. My stomach dropped. What kind of detail? The kind that would have helped us place him more carefully. She sighed. Milo hasn't always been a shelter dog, and his history, it explains a lot about what you're seeing. Tell me, I said, please, I need to understand. And so she did. Milo's first family had wanted a baby more than anything in the world. Karen explained it quietly, reading from notes that had been added to his file after the shelter had done some follow-up investigation. The couple, she didn't share their names, had struggled with infertility for years. IVF attempts, failed adoptions, heartbreak after heartbreak. So they got a dog. Not to replace a child, but to practice, to learn how to care for something, to build routines, to test whether they were ready for the responsibility of a life that depended on them. They treated Milo like an infant, set up a crate in their bedroom with baby monitors, woke for middle-of-the-night bathroom breaks, established schedules. They were devoted, methodical, and prepared. And then, a miracle. The wife got pregnant. They were overjoyed, Karen said. From what we understand, they did everything right, kept Milo involved, let him smell baby items, and prepare him for the transition. But at 32 weeks, something went wrong. The baby didn't make it. The grief was devastating, Karen continued, her voice gentle. And they pulled away from everything, including Milo. He went from being the center of their world to a painful reminder of what they'd lost. Months passed. The couple began healing and decided to try fostering. 6 months after their loss, a 2-year-old boy was placed in their home temporarily while his mother got treatment. Milo bonded with that child instantly, Karen said. They told us he was protective, gentle, watchful. He slept beside the toddler's bed every night. I closed my eyes, already knowing how this story ended. The placement lasted 3 months. Then the child's mother completed her program and got custody back. It was the right outcome. Reunification is always the goal. But from what the couple told us, Milo didn't understand. One morning, the child was there, and by afternoon, he was gone. "And Milo never saw him again," I whispered. "No, and according to his previous owners, he stopped sleeping. He'd pace the house, checking rooms, whining at the door where the child's bedroom had been. When they tried to help him sleep, he'd become anxious. They tried everything: medication, training, a behaviorist. Nothing worked. My throat was tight. So they gave up on him. They were pregnant again," Karen said quietly, "due in a few months, and they were terrified that Milo's behavior would be a danger to the new baby, that his lack of sleep would make him unpredictable. So they threw him away. They surrendered him. They thought it would be better for everyone, that he could start fresh with a family that didn't trigger his trauma." I looked through the doorway at Milo, still sitting rigid beside Noah's door, still refusing the mercy of rest. "But it didn't work," I said, "because he's doing the exact same thing here." "Because he learned that when he sleeps, the children disappear, and he can't let that happen again." I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe around the weight of it. This dog wasn't being stubborn or anxious or difficult. He was trying to save my son from a loss that had already destroyed him twice. "Miss Mitchell?" Karen's voice was gentle. "I'm so sorry we didn't tell you this up front. If you need to return him—" "No," I said, the word coming out fierce. "No, he's not going anywhere." Because I understand now. I understood the terror that kept him awake, the belief that love meant vigilance, that closing your eyes meant losing everything. I understood, because I'd been living the same way since my divorce. Different trauma, same wound. After I hung up with Karen, I sat in the dark kitchen for a long time, staring at my cold coffee and thinking about all the ways I'd been failing. Milo had lost children twice, both times through no fault of his own, both times without warning or explanation. He'd learned that the world was a place where love disappeared if you stopped watching, where letting your guard down meant waking up to emptiness. And what had I learned? That being vulnerable meant getting hurt, that needing people was dangerous, that the safest thing was to stay busy, stay functional, stay just distant enough that the next inevitable loss wouldn't completely destroy me. I thought about the ways I'd pulled back from Noah after the divorce, not consciously, not maliciously, but the small moments I'd chosen exhaustion over presence, the "not now, honey," when he wanted to tell me about his day. The times I'd been physically there but mentally elsewhere, the way I'd let us both drift into parallel solitudes because engaging felt too risky, too raw. I'd been so afraid of not being enough that I'd made myself absent. And Milo had been doing the opposite. He'd been so afraid of absence that he'd made himself permanently present, even when it was destroying him. 2 different responses to the same fear. That love isn't safe, that it won't stay. I walked to Noah's doorway and looked at them both. My son, sleeping peacefully, one arm flung over the side of the bed, and Milo sitting beside him like a statue, trembling with exhaustion but unwilling to yield. "I see you," I whispered to the dog. "I understand." Milo's ears twitched, but he didn't look at me. His focus stayed on Noah. And at that moment, I made a decision. I couldn't fix Milo, couldn't erase what had been done to him or undo the losses that had taught him sleep meant death. I couldn't promise him that Noah would never leave because I didn't know what the future held for any of us. But I could show him what I'd needed someone to show me all these months. That you don't have to carry the weight alone, that presence doesn't have to mean perfection, that staying doesn't require never sleeping. I grabbed a pillow and a blanket from the hall closet and brought them into Noah's room. Milo watched me with those exhausted amber eyes as I made a makeshift bed on the floor beside him. "I've got this shift," I said softly. "You can rest." He didn't, of course, not then, but I stayed anyway. The first night I slept on Noah's floor, Milo didn't rest at all. I didn't expect him to. Trauma doesn't heal because someone offers kindness once. It heals slowly, with consistency, with the patient accumulation of moments that contradict the old story. So I stayed. I pulled my pillow against the wall and sat beside Milo, not touching him, not forcing anything, just there. Present, awake. Around 2 a.m., Noah woke up to use the bathroom. When he came back and saw me on the floor, he paused in the doorway. "Mom, why are you sleeping here?" "Keeping Milo company," I said. "Come back to bed, baby." Noah climbed into bed, but instead of immediately falling back asleep, he leaned over the edge toward us. "Milo," he said softly, "it's okay. We're not going anywhere. You can sleep." The dog's tail gave one small thump. Noah reached out and stroked Milo's head, and I watched as some of the rigidity left the dog's spine. Not much, just a fraction, but it was something. After Noah drifted back to sleep, I spoke quietly to Milo. "I know you're scared," I said. "I know you think if you close your eyes, he'll be gone, but he won't. I promise you, he won't." Milo's eyes stayed fixed on Noah. "I'm going to be right here. Every night, as long as you need. You don't have to do this alone." Around 4 a.m., Milo's head began to droop. His eyes would flutter closed, then snap open again, panic overriding exhaustion. "It's okay," I murmured. "I've got him. I'm watching." And finally, Milo lowered himself. Not completely, just his haunches, shifting from a sit to something closer to a crouch, his front legs still braced, his head still up. But it was something. I stayed awake the rest of the night, watching both of them. My son sleeping peacefully, unaware that he was being protected by something more powerful than locks or alarms, and my dog fighting his own biology teaches me about the kind of love that won't look away. The second night, I brought a book. Same position on the floor, same quiet vigil, but this time I read aloud, soft passages from the novel on my nightstand, just to fill the silence with something other than fear. Milo's ears tracked my voice, but his eyes stayed on Noah. Around midnight, he shifted positions, lowered himself a bit more. His front legs are still straight, but his weight is no longer entirely on them. Progress. The third night, I brought my laptop and worked on bills, quietly clicking through spreadsheets and emails while Milo maintained his watch. Near dawn, his head finally lowered to rest on his paws. His eyes stayed open, but his body had given itself permission to stop holding all the weight. I could have cried with relief. It took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of me sleeping on Noah's floor. 3 weeks of quiet vigils, of soft reassurances, of proving through sheer repetition that presence doesn't require constant alertness. The breakthrough came on a Thursday night. I'd settled into my usual spot, pillow against the wall, blanket over my legs. Noah had insisted on reading Milo a bedtime story, a picture book about a dog who finds a home, and Milo had actually seemed to listen, his head tilted, his tail giving occasional small wags. After Noah fell asleep, Milo took his customary position, but instead of sitting rigidly upright, he laid down, fully down, head on paws, body relaxed, positioned in the doorway where he could see both Noah in bed and me on the floor. "Good boy," I whispered. And at 11:47 p.m., his eyes closed. I held my breath, waiting for them to snap back open, waiting for the panic, the jolt back to vigilance. It didn't come. Milo slept. His breathing deepened, became rhythmic. His paws twitched slightly, dreaming maybe. His body softened into genuine rest. I sat there in the dim glow of Noah's nightlight, watching this exhausted animal finally accept the safety we'd been trying to give him, and I cried. Quietly, so I wouldn't wake either of them, but I cried. Because healing isn't dramatic. It doesn't happen all at once with a crescendo and a resolution. It happens in small surrenders, in the gradual release of muscles held too tight for too long, in the terrifying choice to trust that maybe, this time the world will be kind. Milo slept for 4 hours that night. Then he woke, checked Noah, looked at me, and settled back down for 2 more. The next night, 6 hours. The night after that, 7. Within 2 weeks, he was sleeping through most nights, though he never left his post in Noah's doorway. That spot became his, the place where he could fulfill his purpose while also accepting rest. And slowly, I stopped sleeping on the floor. Not all at once. I stayed for another week, then started spending every other night in my own bed, then moved to just checking in before I went to sleep. Milo seemed to understand. He'd watch me leave, settle into a spot, and close his eyes. He trusted me now. Not that nothing bad would happen, but that if it did, he wouldn't face it alone. A month after that first full night's sleep, I found myself sitting in the living room floor with Noah, watching Milo sprawl in a patch of sunlight, completely relaxed. "He's happy now," Noah said, stroking Milo's belly. "Yeah," I agreed. "He is." "Are you happy, Mom?" The question caught me off guard. I looked at my son, this resilient, beautiful boy who'd weathered his father's leaving and his mother's grief and had somehow come through it still capable of asking about other people's feelings. "I'm getting there," I said honestly, because the truth was, Milo had taught me something I'd forgotten. That healing doesn't mean the trauma never happened. It means you stop letting it control you. It means you learn that staying present doesn't require staying perfect, that being vigilant about love doesn't mean never closing your eyes. I'd started therapy, started actually talking to Noah about his feelings instead of just assuming he was fine, started forgiving myself for not being everything all the time, started sleeping better. That night, I tucked Noah into bed and watched Milo settle into his usual spot in the doorway. His eyes were already drooping, his breathing already slowing. "Sweet dreams," I whispered to both of them. As I turned to leave, Milo's tail thumped once against the floor. Not a greeting, not excitement, just acknowledgement. "I know you're there. I know you're staying. I can rest now." I went to my own room and climbed into bed, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I fell asleep not because I was exhausted, but because I felt safe. Not because everything was perfect, not because all our wounds had healed, but because I'd finally learned what Milo had been trying to teach me all along. Staying is the work. And we were both finally ready to do it. If Milo's journey touched your heart, don't let it end with a like. Hit subscribe and join Heartbound Canine Tales.